All right, guys, today we're going to talk about creating a leadership development pipeline. This month, our focus is on growing people. Y'all know that we have three major systems in our teaching. It is systems for getting people, systems for keeping people, and systems for growing people. Each month we focus on one of those. This month we're focusing on growing people. So we've talked about small groups. This month we've talked about Dream Team. Today, we're going to talk about how do you develop a leadership pipeline so that you're always growing the ranks of those who get under the load with you. How do you duplicate yourself in the lives of those you've been called to lead? It can't happen accidentally. It should happen on purpose. So we're talking about growing people, and we're going to talk specifically today about how Jesus developed leaders. Go with me, if you would, to Mark's Gospel, chapter 3, verses 13 through 15. This pericope of scripture is so perfect for teaching biblical discipleship, because this is how Jesus did it. Jesus went up on a mountainside. Get the imagery. He went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted. Oh, I'm getting excited. I love this already. Jesus went up on the mountainside and called to him those who he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12. Now, oh my gosh, this is so good. He didn't appoint 20, 30, 40, 50. He appointed 12 that they might be with him, that he might, the other version says, give them power to preach the gospel and to have authority to drive out demons. This is not just a nice story. Jesus is modeling for us here how you begin the disciple-making process, which is in fact how you begin the leadership development pipeline. So let's break it down. The first thing we see Jesus do, he went up. He had to elevate his position. The job of the leader is to get to a higher place so that he or she can see what others cannot see. That requires an elevation of your spiritual disposition and your spiritual position. You've got to do this in a way that isn't in your flesh, but from a position that's closer to God. All right. So the leader separated himself to gain a divine perspective. So that's what we see Jesus do first. So as you're getting ready to choose disciples, and I recommend that you do this if you've not yet done so. If we're sitting down and have a cup of coffee and I said, Pastor Washington, Trevor, tell me, man, who are your disciples in your church? If you can't quickly say, well, Paul, I got this one, this one, this one. If you sit there and scratch your head and you say, well, my whole church are my disciples, I'll be like, Rev, let's talk about this a little more. Because if you got more than 20 or 30 people in your church, all of them, not based on the Jesus model, all of them can't be your personal disciples. So you've got to figure out in your church who are the people you are called to spend that kind of up close personal time with. So he went up and then he called those whom he wanted. I love this. Jesus knew that he was about to take a walk to the cross. And that's what we're all doing. We are presenting our bodies as living sacrifices. We are taking up our cross and following the Lord Jesus, right? And so it's a difficult journey. Sometimes ministry is hell. And if we've got to deal with that, guess what God gives you? He gives you the right to pick folks you don't mind walking to the cross with. You get to pick that. And in fact, you have to pick it. You need to pick. You should pick those. And here's the criteria that Jesus used. He picked those he wanted. That's as spiritual as it gets in the text. How did Jesus pick? He picked the ones he wanted. He picked the ones who he had chemistry with, that he felt comfortable with, that he didn't have to feel like he had to be on guard so much so that he couldn't be himself. There was going to have to be a level of vulnerability that Jesus would have to exhibit with this group. So he picked people. Let me just use my spiritual imagination. I think Jesus picked some folks that he didn't mind laughing with. He picked some people he didn't mind cutting up with just a little bit. Some folks who had an affinity, who had chemistry with him. And that's what each of us needs to do when we go up on the mountain, to look down, to pick folks that don't always get on your nerves. You love them, you glad they there, you grateful they there, but they get on your last nerve. I would suggest, brother and sister, that's probably not the one that needs to be your disciple, unless God just says, yeah, bring that one on the team to agitate something out of you I want to agitate. Unless God says it, pick people you don't mind having at your house. If you got somebody that you think is your disciple and you feel uncomfortable about having them sit around your coffee table, I don't think they're your disciple. So Jesus picked those whom he wanted, and you get to do the same thing too. Be intentional. Don't be random. Choose carefully, choose prayerfully, not emotionally. but pick people with whom you have chemistry. Then the next thing, here's the litmus test for the first litmus test for leaders. The people Jesus picked left where they were, came to Jesus. They left their paradigm, they left their methodology, they left their plans, they left their motives, and they sacrificed their own agenda to say, you know what? Being up here where Jesus is attractive enough to me that I'm willing to give up my way. Everybody in your church is not going to do that. And there's some people who are there, supposed to be there in your church, who won't do that, but they're still supposed to be at your church. But this litmus test is the first test of whether someone is called to you personally. The way you do it, the way you say it, the way you carry yourself is attractive to your disciples, that they're willing to leave their way because they want to learn your way. So never want somebody so bad that you go where they are rather than them coming where you are. I don't care how talented they are, I don't care how much money they have, I don't care how much influence they have. Never go where they are. Require them to come where you are. I'm talking specifically about choosing disciples. I'm not saying that there aren't times when the shepherd doesn't go grab the sheep. We're not talking about that. We're talking about picking disciples, right? If you're in a meeting, your group of disciples you picked, and you got somebody there who's doing more talking than you talking, that's a sign they think they know as much or more than you. So again, I'm not saying put them out the church, but if I've called a group of people together to disciple and I've got somebody, I want everybody to have something to say. I'm not saying that it's the Paul show, but if I'm teaching and the disposition of anybody in there is that they're the teacher, y'all know what that looks like and feels like. They probably ain't the one. And you got to be willing to admit that to yourself. So he calls them to himself, and here's the thing, so that he could give them power. That's what I think the King James says it that way. There was something he had to give them. And you got to be prepared. Whenever you're discipling somebody, what do you have to give them? So it's incumbent upon me as the discipler, in my church especially, to have an intentionality around where am I trying to take somebody and to paint a clear picture of that. That's one of the reasons why in our church we have that discipleship pathway. Because I want you to know, if you come rock with me, this ain't gonna be by accident. We ain't gonna be just trying to figure it out. We're not experimenting as much as we are implementing a premeditated pathway. You owe that to the people who look to you for leadership to take them somewhere, not by accident, but on purpose. That means we gotta prepare. We gotta study. We have to get ourselves together so that when we are pouring in, it's something worth receiving. So he called them to himself that he might give them power. So he equipped them. Here's the other thing. He gave them power to fulfill the assignment that he then gave. If you're gonna disciple people and make leaders, you gotta be willing to give them something to do. And this is scary for us as pastors, because if you've been pastoring for more than 30 days, you gave something to somebody and they messed it up. And so every time that happens, if you're not careful, you become, sometimes unknowingly, that much more trepidatious about doing that again. And so if you look at yourself and at your church, and if all the key things are too many of the key things that are necessary to make church happen, you doing them, you're probably not discipling people like you should. And it may be because you got some PTSD. We talk about this quite a bit in this group because it bears talking about. Just because Jesus knew, because he was omniscient, that there would be a Judas and he knew what Judas would do, he didn't say, well, since there's a Judas, let me just do this all myself. I don't need the 12. He knew that a part of picking 12 meant that there was going to be some heartache there. There's going to be some betrayal. Somebody was going to mess up the assignment. But that did not stop Jesus from doing what he knew he had to do so that his agenda could be accomplished, to establish the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of truth. He knew he had to do that. And so you have to pour into people on purpose. You're pouring into them, you're equipping them, you're empowering them because you're about to give them something to do. So he went up on the mountain, called those whom he wanted. They came to him. He gave them power and then sent them out to do what he gave them to do. And it was to preach the gospel and cast out devils. He gave them authority and he gave them an assignment. So the second part of this that I want to talk about today is, now that you got these disciples, what does the discipleship process look like? The first thing we've talked about is how you select them, what the paradigm should be, what that process should look like. Because I really do think that as your church grows, every pastor should have somewhere around 12 people or so that have access, that you personally disciple, knowing that you're not going to disciple the whole church, because what's involved in discipleship is too in-depth for you to do it with very many more than 12. If Jesus in all his omnipotence only had 12 disciples, I think we should accept that our number is probably that, or maybe a few less. Like, this is Jesus. We're talking about Jesus. And I'm saying it like this because I know this is a different way of thinking about this, because most of us think your job to disciple the whole church. No, it's your job to make sure that the whole church gets discipled. You see the distinction there? As the senior pastor, it is not your job to disciple the church. It is your job to make sure that the church gets discipled. Just because it has to be done doesn't mean you're doing all of it. You're doing enough of it so that a culture of that becomes established in your church. Now that you got these 12, all right, Paul, what do I do with them? Here's what I've learned about biblical discipleship. The learning cycle has three major components. Let me just give you all three for your notes, then we'll break it down. In vernacular, it is tell them, show them, let them. That's the three components of real discipleship. Let's talk about tell them. The proper way to say this academically is direct instruction. If you need a highfalutin official technical term, it is direct instruction, all right? It's typically theoretical. I'm giving you the theory behind something, all right? I'm teaching you the principles of it. I'm teaching you the fundamentals of it. It is typically lecture. It's sometimes Socratic. It is the sage on the stage up telling somebody, here's what this is. This is teaching and explanation. And that's very important. It's critical. It's the starting point to discipleship. The problem, though, is that in the West, we think that's all discipleship is. Because we're preachers and we're really good at talking, and we're getting better and better at using that microphone, standing in front of a crowd and giving someone the theory of it. But that's only a third of discipleship at best. If you stop there, you have failed to disciple. If all you do is tell them, we're derelict in our duty. We have not fulfilled our assignment. But let me give you examples of this, though. You do have to do it, so let's make sure we're doing it right. Luke chapter 4, verse 18. Luke 4 and 18, Jesus is telling them, he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to preach the gospel, to set the oppressed free. Here, Jesus is announcing his mission. He is explaining deliverance. He's explaining healing. He's introducing this idea of gospel power. He is giving them the theory. He is telling them. And so when we teach theology, when we teach purpose, when we teach the mission and vision of the church, we are doing this. We are telling people, and you need to do a good job at it. This instruction lays the foundation for imitation, all right? So that's the starting point. Your discipleship class, right? Even growth track, that's telling them. That's cool. You need that. But what do we do next? Here's the next phase. Phase 2, show them. This is what's called guided practice, okay? It's modeling, it's demonstration. I like to use this example of gumbo. I don't know why every time I think about discipleship, I think about gumbo. I can't give everybody the secrets to this, you see. Everybody, y'all know how it is. Everybody can't know how everything is done. This is a closely guarded secret. So if you ever get the chance to learn how to make gumbo from me, that means you in. That means I let you come to, you know the address to the house. You came through the front door. You in my kitchen. Wait a minute. You are standing at the stove next to me. What I tell you is equal parts flour and oil. And I show you how to stir that pot, and don't walk away from it, because if it gets any black specks, you got to start over. Wait a minute. Everybody don't get that kind of access. Now, I can tell you about making gumbo, but when I really get serious about helping you do it, I show you how to make gumbo. Now, I can give y'all the recipe right now and tell you how to make a good gumbo, and I'm telling you, but I'm not taking you as far as I could take you. When I'm really serious about you doing it, come on here, stand up here next to this stove with me. Let me do this with you. Let me model this for you. And what does it look like in ministry? Well, let's talk about preaching. If you don't ever take anybody into the lab to show them what your study process is like, what the structure of your messages are like. Y'all, I would be a conference preacher. If ever Pastor Will would just decide he would disciple me in preaching, y'all, I would be somebody's preacher. If Pastor Wilcox would say, Paul, come on here, let me show you. Let me let you in the lab. That dude is a preaching somebody. I would just love to know, Pastor Wilcox, what's your process, man? Can we sit? Can we develop a sermon or two together so I can get in your head? I saw what you did in front of us. Man, can I be your apprentice? Can you show me what that development process is like? And we've got to do that. Now, Pastor Will, it's 2 thumbs up. You are the preacher, all right? So this is what we got to do for the right people in our churches. Show them what real leadership looks like. Show them what it looks like to run a meeting that is contentious, one of them tough meetings. You got to have some disciples with you. Maybe they'll fly on the wall. Maybe you tell them be seen and not heard. Don't you say nothing, but you come in here and let me show you how to deal with a runaway deacon or whatever, you see. Here's the biblical example of this. I'll give you two scriptures for this. Luke chapter 8, 26 through 39. Jesus is casting out all kinds of devils. He's casting out legions of demons in the region of the Gadarenes. He's showing. Now he talks in Luke 4, the Lord has anointed me to preach the gospel, to release the oppressed. He's telling them, hey, here's what preaching looks like. Here's what deliverance ministry looks like. But then he says, come on, fellas, let's go to the Gadarenes. Let's go to the cemetery and let me show you how to deal with legion. All right. And we see the text. We know what happens there. In Mark 9:25, Jesus rebukes the unclean spirit from a boy who is violently tormented. The disciples heard Jesus talk about deliverance. Now he's showing them in real time. Here is what this looks like. I gave you the theory. I gave you the principles. Here is what it looks like. Come go with me. Watch me do this. Don't interrupt. There's a business I learned. There's a guy named John Duffner. He's an organic farmer from Fargo, North Dakota. He's the best closer I've ever met in my life in business. And if I call John right now and say, John, I got a whale. I got somebody who needs our business. I'm going to edify you. I'm going to get them in front of you and let them know that you're the best thing since sliced bread. And we going to Panera Bread. And I'm going to sit there and let John do the talking. And guess what my job is when John's doing the talking? Shut up. Until John Duffner asks me to say something, I don't say nothing. I don't say nothing. It's not that I'm an idiot. No, this is the guy. He's modeling. He's showing me what to do. And so sometimes we need to tell our proteges, now you coming in with me, you coming with me in here. Don't you say nothing unless I call on you. And if you have people in your world who are your disciples that you can't say that to without risking offense, they ain't your disciples. If they go in there and say something when you told them not to and they can't take correction after the fact, all right, move right along. You've got to have the kind of relationship where when you bring them into your own modeling of it, they don't mess up the thing, all right? Be gracious enough in advance to tell them, I'm gonna bring you in on this, but be quiet, all right? Here's the last thing we see here. This is let them, all right? You talk to them about the theory of it. You show them how it's done. Now the risky part. This is called independent practice. We've got direct instruction. We've got guided practice. Now we got independent practice. This is releasing and reviewing. Don't just release, but also review, okay? We see this in Luke chapter 9, verse 1 through 6. Jesus sends them out 2 by 2, giving them power and authority. And we see, I think the same situation is retold in Mark's Gospel chapter 9. They go out, they try, and they fail. They come back to Jesus, their hair is everywhere, their garments are torn up, and say, Jesus, we tried to do what you showed us. Oh, but we didn't get it. And Jesus tells them, this is the debrief. Oh yeah, fellas, prayer and fast. You gotta have the situation where you give them a chance to succeed or fail without you. This is frightening. It's scary for us as pastors because we're afraid of what will happen if our people fail. But can I suggest to you that the cost of developing leaders in your church, you've got to make your church a safe place for your potential leaders to fail. We got to be careful that we're not so focused on production value of our worship experiences and our church experiences in general, that we don't create a culture where we tell people, hey, this is a place where we teach and learn. This is a place where new leaders are developed. And there are going to be times. I was at a convocation on Friday night. I was a Friday night speaker. Y'all, my life changed Friday night. Apostle David Pittman, a man I never preached for before, invited me to preach. I didn't know what to expect. It was incredible. I don't have time to talk about it. But one thing he did before I got up on Friday night at convocation, he had 3 ministers in training on the schedule with 8 minutes to preach each. On Friday night at convocation, prime time. I said, I've never been in a convocation where during the main service, sometimes we do that before the main service, but during the main service, you got brand new ministers in training preaching on prime time. I said, I've never seen it on this wise, because Apostle David Pittman is committed to making even his convocation a safe place for new leaders to hone their craft. And we've got to do the same thing. Some of them were better than others. Nobody really bombed, but there were some better than others. But the convocation, it was clear, the group was taught, get with the preacher. Whoever I put up, get with them. And you need to say that in your own church. Whoever I put up, let's get with the preacher. I grew up in a church culture like that in Washington, D.C. Bishop Alfred Owens taught us how to get with the preacher. And so Calvary in D.C. was a safe environment for us to learn how to do this stuff. I just changed my liturgy in my church, my order of service. I had done a scaled down one because I was trying to do this 90-minute service. We've abandoned that because I'm a 2-hour church service. It's just no way around it. Our church, our people used to 2-hour service. It'll be 2-hour church. So we've been training a new batch of deacons and a bunch of elders who've come to the church who already preordained before they got to us, been indoctrinating them around our principles, practices, values, and that. And they've done a beautiful job of being trained and being faithful. They're really becoming a cohesive group. And I realized unless I built some more speaking parts into my Sunday service, they were never going to have the opportunity to learn how to command the crowd, how to do the things that a person in the mic needs to do. So we redid the whole liturgy, and we've added 5 speaking parts that ordinarily were not in the service. Now, some of y'all have that already, but I had gotten rid of, my praise and worship team did everything. Call to worship, prayer, scripture, and it was like one big thing because we were going 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we're out of there, moving to the next thing. Now we've broken that into the parts, and I was a little scared because I know how our service builds. It's a crescendo, like the whole service. I don't like ups and downs in service. The whole service builds to a crescendo till we create an atmosphere that's really conducive to a real move of God in my service. And I'm very intentional about that. And so I'm nervous, like, Lord, what are they gonna do? But do you know they've been watching us do it so long now? Do you know they didn't miss a beat? They're now learning. I mean, from call to worship, prayer, scripture, to welcoming of the guest, to even introduction of the speaker. Usually me and my wife preaching, and almost right there, no, cuz. But now we're teaching that person how to edify the preacher, and we're actually creating another level of anticipation from the congregation for what's about to be said. So all that is simply to say, there has to be a time where you give them a chance to do what you've taught them to do, knowing it's not gonna be perfect, but prepare them in advance. I'm gonna let you do this, but we're gonna have a debrief. And you gotta have thick enough skin to take constructive feedback, or else I can't let you practice. If I don't have permission from you to give you honest feedback on the tail end of it, then I'm not gonna give you a shot, because that's a part of the discipling process. If you create this as a pattern in your church, 2 of the foundational things, choosing them and then creating this, tell them, show them, let them, this process will create a discipling culture in your church. The very, very last thing I will say that aids this is creating a culture in your church where every leader must have a number 2. No leader can lead by himself or herself. Who is your deputy? Who's your number 2? And always you and the deputy be looking in your group, whether it's a small group or an auxiliary/dream team, who in your group who's not yet a leader shows leadership potential. Make it a part of the culture in your church that the subcomponent parts of your church, those leaders are always passing up to you, because the church is growing. The ads are going to work. All the stuff we do with getting people, keep people, this is going to grow the population of your church. So that means there's more leaders in there. So as that church is growing, you got to have somebody with eyes and ears looking out to see who shows up to everything, who's always volunteering to help, who has a sweet, peaceable spirit, who's willing. Those are people with leadership potential. They need to be brought before you so that, for instance, they can be brought into the small group facilitator training, because every quarter we're trying to roll out more small groups. So where do I get small group leaders? From the same process I just mentioned to you. Everything I talked about today is where we get more small group leaders. And as people are coming to the ranks of the church, my disciples are looking out for more people who have leadership potential, and they come through the same process over and over and over again.